What is content design like in China, and how does it differ from countries like the United States or the UK or other areas of the world? Join me today as I speak to two experts about how this emerging discipline in China is changing and what we can learn from it. Welcome back to Writers of Silicon Valley. I'm your host, Patrick Stafford. And wow, what a reception to the first episode back after a few years. I'm kind of blown away, actually, by how many people listened to the episode and gave me good feedback. And it's clear that, you're all still listening after a few years, which is really, really nice. So thank you for tuning in again. Really great feedback on the last episode with Chelsea Larson. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it. It's nice to be back talking to people and learning about what's going on in the industry. And there's a lot of hope right now, I think. So it's a good time. In fact, I just saw a message on LinkedIn that said that the number of content design job ads has risen by about 6% in the recent past. So it's a good indication that things might be improving just a little bit. In any case, thank you for coming back and listening to another episode. Today's a really interesting one. So a while ago, the UX Content Collective, we published an article by the two guests today about content design in China. And these two content designers, Anna Potapova and Arnaud Frattini, they conducted, a survey, a series of interviews about content design in China, what it's like, how it differs from other countries and other areas, particularly Silicon Valley. And the reception to it has been fantastic. People found it really interesting. I know I found it really captivating. And it's been a few months since then. So I invited those two back onto the podcast to have a chat about what the reception has been like, but also just about content design in China in general. It's such a different country, and it's the customs are different, and the approach to design is different. And I feel like that's a great opportunity to discuss some of the assumptions, or maybe just the inbuilt ideas we have about design that maybe we need to question a little. So we had a really great chat, and so you're in for a really great discussion today. So I do hope you enjoy it. Before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. One thing is, if you really enjoy the podcast, I would love it if you could please leave a review. The reviews are the way that people can discover the podcast and hear new episodes. So would really appreciate it if you're able to leave a review. You don't have to write an essay or anything, but just give us some stars on Apple or Spotify or something like that. That would be great. I'll leave links in the show notes for you to do that. So if you do like the podcast, would really appreciate that. Secondly, just to remind you that listeners to the podcast get 20% off any workshops or courses at UX Content Collective, and would really encourage you to go check out some of the new ones we've got. We've got a brand new workshop from David Connis, who's running a workshop called Systems Thinking for UX Content, and it's selling out. So it's a fantastic workshop. There's a range of different learning options for you to choose from. So if you've got some training budget to spend, you're just looking to upskill, definitely head to the site and check that out. And you can get that for podcast 20, again, in the show notes. All right, well, that's enough for me. Again, really hope you enjoy this chat with Anna and Anu, and I'll see you at the end. So, look, it's been a few months now since we published the article that you both wrote on UX Content Collective, and I know that we received a ton of really positive feedback about it. I think people were really interested to hear what content design is like in a completely different country, and not only that, but a country where design sensibilities and instincts may be completely different from what the rest of the industry perceives as normal. So I'm wondering, for you two, since writing that article, what has the feedback been like for you? Have people gotten in touch, maybe outside of China or even inside China, to give their own perspectives? What's the feedback been like?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for working with us and hosting us and providing those beautiful visuals. I actually got a lot of compliments on LinkedIn about how visuals are so pretty and complimentary and really hit the key points. So thanks again, Patrick, for working with us on that. Yeah, a lot of positive feedback on LinkedIn. Definitely got a lot of people from China and Southeast Asia, UX design practitioners, some UX writing practitioners reaching out to me on the LinkedIn. Also, we started building our community on WeChat, which is one of the most popular messengers in China. So that was definitely great to see so many people caring about what we're doing, and also people of different disciplines, being the designers, being the localization specialists. It was, yeah, it was pretty inspiring actually to see people care about our work so much. What
Sure.
about you?
No, pretty much the same feedback. Definitely got in touch with a lot of people based in China, but also Southeast Asia, notably Singapore or
Yeah,
Malaysia. People that are facing with the same main differences that on the way to do UX and content design between their country and more like Western markets.
right.
So it was very interesting to find a common ground on that. Some of them also join us on the WeChat
Yeah.
community, even though WeChat is not the main messaging app in those countries. So that's very interesting for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
That's
feel
awesome.
like we attracted a lot of people, I would say, working outside of, say, North America, which I think is really one of
Yeah.
the centers of content design,
Mhm.
content strategy. And I feel that some people, it resonated with some people what we wrote in terms of, hey, it's different than this country, and people who also feel like they are not 100% on the same path with, I would say, North American companies or North American industry. They feel kinship to us, and I think there were some people from Europe as well.
Yeah.
Um, I think from France, we also had some
Yes.
people sharing the article,
Yeah.
and I think it's also a great way to open conversation about how content design can be different and how it's not all structured, it's not all practiced, it's not all perceived the same way as it is in North America, for example. Yeah,
I mean
Yeah, I
the
thought the. Oh,
oh,
sorry, Anna. Go ahead.
it's just to wrap up. I think the article achieved its goal, and again, that's thanks to you, Patrick, because our goal was to basically put China on the map, if you want. You had content design is mostly North American, European discipline in its origins or in its thought leaders, but you also have local communities, for example, in Africa, in Nigeria, or in India, or even in Southeast Asia. And now you have I mean, you also have people in China, and it's people actually. I mean, there were already people in China doing content design, but people are more aware of
right.
this, and I think that was our main goal with the article. So that's a great thing.
Well, goal achieved, and yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I would say the amount of work that you both put in, not just in writing the article, but in interviewing so many people in the country, I think was really great. I think people really enjoyed hearing a perspective from a range of different content designers. One thing that really struck me though was the way you outlined the differences between how people in, I mean, for lack of a better term, we'll say the West, use software. So and the rules and the instincts we have for content design. So, being short, being concise, and making sure that we take up the least amount of space possible, and how some of those instincts in China are completely different, and how users might respond. I think the one that really got to me was the amount of content on a page, right? So when we go to an app, we expect to see a minimal outlay because we don't want to be overburdened with information. We want to find what we want very quickly, and so users will scan. Whereas you described a situation in China where, in fact, it's sort of the more content that can be put onto an application is actually, in some cases, better based on what users want there. So I'm wondering if you're able to take the listeners through maybe just a quick summary of some of the key differences between users in, say, North America or Europe or even Asia Pacific, like Australia, and some of the design instincts that might be different in China to what they might expect.
You want me to get started?
Go ahead.
Okay. Starting with the obvious, just like you mentioned about the density of information that you have on a page, in an app developed in China for the Chinese market. Definitely much more information. The To put it simply, the rule here is more is more in China. The more information, the more visual effects, the more offers that you have. Talking about e-commerce app, that's what we do on the daily. Both, it's better. It's simply better. And interestingly, when you ask Chinese users. When you show them like a simplified minimalistic design that we could find in North America and Europe, their reaction could even be like, it's something is missing, it's incomplete, and it's not that attractive, and it could often be not attractive enough, or even not attractive at all. It's This hub is offering me nothing. Not as much as I would expect, so they're probably not as big and reliable as I think it should be. So you have this aspect as well, but then you have other aspects as well.
Yeah. I think that is something that we can see on. I guess not only in apps, we can also see it in public spaces, right? For example, in a park where I'd say European park, there would be one sculpture.
Yeah.
In Chinese park, there would be a lot of sculptures.
Mm.
Abundance is good. More is good.
Mm.
Letting people make their own choices is good. I think we also cannot talk about design in China and content in China without talking about how industry works in general, right? Because as Erica Hall put it, design is business. The way your business is done is the way that your design is done. It's the same thing. So it's important to note that business is very fast paced in China. Everything is very fast paced. People work really hard. People overtime. Competition is fierce, and that affects the way how apps are created, how products are created. Again, going back to public spaces, there is a spot for a grocery store close to my house, and I've been living there for 3 years, and I've seen like 3 different grocery stores going by.
Mm.
They come and go. Everything is very fast. Everything is very fast, and you have to work really fast. And when you work really fast, you cannot really have all the time you want to polish all the details or conduct all the research. So everything is very fast paced, and people need to make sure that their services are competitive. So the core of the app is service. The core of the app is, can we really do that better than competition, right? If you take 2 delivery apps, one can deliver in 2 days, one can deliver in one day. It's not a choice based
Yeah.
on their UX. It's a choice based on their service. Even
Hmm.
if the logistics company that delivers in one day, even if they provide you with some very confusing UX, you will still choose them because they are better. Their service is
Hmm.
better. So I guess we are not at the level yet to talk about, does this app fulfill my self actualization needs? Does this app fit my worldview? Does this app fit what kind of person I am? We're not there yet, I feel. It's more about, can it do its job? Is
Yeah.
it safe to use? Is its functionality matching my needs at this moment? So I guess it's also this aspect of fast-paced business and really focusing on services, focusing on the big things rather than focusing about details of user experience.
So how is that reflected in the work culture? Because it's in a lot of companies in, say, Silicon Valley or other tech companies around the world outside of China, content is often seen as both simultaneously both a critical part of the business, but also a little bit of a luxury. Like, you have the ability to take some time and work on information architecture and getting everything right and making sure that the tone is correct and so on. But in the fast-paced environment that you're talking about in China, there may not be the time to focus on those sorts of things. And I know that in your article, you talk a little bit about the fact that in many companies, content designers don't really exist. They don't have them. And so you'll find product managers or developers will be writing a lot of the content. So how does that square with the fact that you're now seeing more content designers arrive in, well, I wouldn't say arrive in China, but those roles are arriving in China? Do you see that more content designers are coming on? Is there still a culture where it's very fast paced, and so you have developers and so on writing content? What's the state of the industry right now?
The need for content designers mostly coming from companies that are planning or actively investing in doing business internationally, targeting to international audience, catering to international audience. In the local market here in China, you really don't have time. Like you said, it's so fast paced. And instead of doing user research, instead of um, spending a week on design sprint, you can just come up with some basic ideas basing on your project team's understanding and just send it online, test it on a small percentage of users, which in case of China still be very decent number because of the population here, right? And you will see the data in real time. So it's not like you're not doing research and you're not thinking about it. It's just because of the pace of the business, you're doing it in real time. You're doing it
Hmm,
in real users. It's not about polishing the thing before it goes online. It's about thing goes online, then we polish it.
got
Yeah.
it.
So in this system, it's very hard, I feel, to fit content design. Now, when we talk about companies catering to overseas markets, that's a whole different story, right? And there is another key player that enters the game in addition to your UX designer, your content designer, your product, your developer, and that would be localization, right? How can we do localization? And sometimes even I see people from localization team taking ownership over certain aspects of content design work. Remember on the meetup, we had this fantastic lady who was doing localization. So basically, she was taking source text from her product team and translating it to other languages with translation company. And she had to write a style guide. She had to write a style guide because
Right.
guess what? You cannot have consistent translation if your
Hmm,
source text is not consistent.
hmm,
So she had to fill this gap herself because there was no content team. But then next step after that would be having a content team, right?
got it. Yep.
Once you have content team, your content team will have to face the challenge of re-educating all these people
Hmm,
who are used to do things fast, who are used to figure it out as they go, and say, let's take this back a little bit. Okay, before we name this feature, maybe we should ask a few users.
hmm,
So it's a question of needing content design to cater to users overseas who are used to polish details, who are used to content design being present in the process. At the same time, it needs to align with the speed of business, and certainly more educational effort is needed to um, explain to people how it works and what is the benefit of it. They see the need, but as Sabrina Wales was putting in our interview and in the article, it's still we still have a long way to go. We still
hmm.
need to educate many people. Yeah, that brings us that to what's happening
Yes.
next. What is the future?
Perhaps just to add up to what you mentioned, it's I feel the level of awareness that that companies, organization, and people in China have about content design is strongly tied up to the awareness that and understanding that they have of UX in general. And I think Anna explained very well. When you build a product with an emphasis, with a focus on engineering, development, coding, and so on, get shipped fast, a focus on functionality over usability and user experience, then you don't necessarily have a strong awareness about UX, and therefore it's even harder to understand the value or the impact, business impact that content design can bring to your business. Therefore, it's less likely that some organization will actively look for content designers in their team, and start building a team like that. But so next for the future, I think in the article we divided up in we take two directions. The first one is like for companies that operate locally, so
Hmm.
Chinese companies operating on the Chinese market, and then companies operating globally, so Chinese companies operating globally. Um, and we saw very different situations for both, and also very different future prospects for both directions. When it comes to companies operating locally, when we ask people around, and we keep asking people around, as we talk around about the article, we keep meeting with UX designers based in China, even some UX writers. We ask them those questions. We got that same feeling that things are not necessarily going to move, because
Mm.
of, I mean, in the direction of a well-established content design discipline in China, an increasing amount of content designers, for example. Why? Because of what I just explained. You first need to raise awareness of what UX is and what it can bring to your business before you can bring content design, UX writing to the table. Perhaps you will have one of the reason behind that is the fact that the how to say the market when it comes to digital product, you have fierce competition, just like Anna explained. Everything is very fast paced, but you also have just a small a number of key players. And if those key players are on the same level, they're not leveling up their user experience awareness, they're not playing that game of UX, then none of them will, because they are all looking at each other. What is the competitors doing? What could be our next step? So UX can become a competitive edge in the future for them, but it's not currently happening, or at
Mm.
least we don't see it happen. And another a trend that we mentioned in the article is if you have, for example, the silver economy. If you have I would say older people, or older generations, in China, you have more and more of those people, and they are also more and more using digital products, but their needs of digital product, their user experience is widely different from other generations.
Mm.
Um, how do you cater their needs? How do you make sure that their experience as user is smooth and delightful? And perhaps this is something that local players, local companies, will have to deal with very soon, and that could potentially lead to a better awareness on how UX is important. So that's something we identify quite well, um, when even in the article and even chatting after that. And then for companies operating globally, um, I think Anna explained that very well. There is a need for Chinese companies operating globally. They understand that they need to sound local, that they
Mm.
need to sound authentic to users on other markets. So it often leads to how to say language work on the language optimization, localization of the app, and so on, which in itself lead very easily, as Anna explained, to content design, the rise of the emergence, I would say, of content design within a team, within a company. And but then you have a huge work of how to say education for those stakeholders and business leaders of what is content design. Why could it be so beneficial to your app? Why for if Didi, for example, abroad you have Uber
Mhm.
for taxi driving. Here in China, you have Didi. If Didi try to expand abroad, they will realize that probably Uber has some UX practices within their app that they should pay attention to, because I mean, users of Uber would be the same as the one using Didi, and they already have some expectations in terms of user experience. They will have to level up themselves, or at least to localize their user experience on their app. So going abroad means that they need to level up their understanding UX and therefore content design. This is something we've noticed as well. Yes.
Are you hearing the same thing among your peers? You've mentioned the meetup that you're now organizing, so that's great to see that you've got content designers coming together and sort of sharing best practices and so on. Yeah, I've seen a couple of the posts about you guys getting together, which is great. Are you hearing similar things from the people who are attending those meetups? I'm curious to hear like what some of you've described some of the challenges that you're facing, but what are you also hearing from the people attending those meetups and what they're dealing with? And are those people, I should also ask, to ask another question within a question, are those people from international backgrounds, or do you have sort of native Chinese people also working in content and attending those meetups?
Right. Fantastic question. I guess I should probably start with the second one to kind of
Sure.
explain what are we doing and how we're doing it, and
Yep.
what kind of people come to the meetups. So last time in March we had 36 people, right? Yeah.
Wow.
I have to say it's mostly people with international background.
Mhm.
Reason being, we chose English as our language of communication, and of course it is a limitation, right? It
Mhm.
is a limitation, and even as we interviewed people for the article, we interviewed some people who spoke Chinese, so we interviewed them in Chinese, and clearly we are missing part of the audience. We're clearly missing some Chinese designers who may be not very confident in their English skills. So that there is limitation. At the same time, we made this choice because we clearly see the strong correlation between companies working overseas and content design.
Mhm.
So it's more likely for us to find our people within the companies or industries with more international orientation. So that's regarding who comes to the meetups. It's people from localization teams, it's people from content teams, it's some designers as well, different backgrounds really,
Marketing.
and marketing, yeah, marketing as well,
Copywriting, yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Some foreigners, some Chinese people. So I guess it's a mixed crowd in terms of who is there, right? And again, I feel like there are different people with different understanding
Yeah.
of content design, and on different levels. You have people who maybe worked previously for overseas companies that came to China, and they used to do content design in Chinese, but their communication language was English because their company was an overseas company. Um, as well as content design practitioners from those companies that are aiming to go abroad from China. Yeah. So that's regarding the crowd.
Yes.
Regarding the overall vibe and questions, I think we're getting a lot of questions that are, I'd say, I don't want to say basic, but yes, like foundational questions.
Got
For
it.
example, on our very first meetup, um, I got a lot of people asking me like how to make how to make style guide work, how
Mm.
to um, how to make sure that I can align the whole company on the same principles for writing. So I did a whole presentation on that to answer that question, right? And also, people are interested in like how do you structure the process? How do you work with stakeholders? How do you convince stakeholders to try something new when it comes to content design? How do you convince your stakeholders to try a little bit different workflow or collaboration model? I've been getting a lot of those. What about you?
Um, Thinking about so 2 weeks ago we had that offline event with a UX design community in Shanghai, and it was also interesting to meet those people face to face. They seem to be, um, I think there is a real curiosity about content design. Most of the crowd were UX designers because it's a UX design community. um, Other people are people, I mean, how to say, gravitating around UX design, so more like visual designers,
Mm.
developers as well, entrepreneurs, were just curious about the topic, but not that many content designers or UX writer per se. um, and yes, most of the questions I had, I mean, the feeling I got is curiosity. People are curious about this. They feel it could be impactful for their business or their organization. They just wonder how. So I got that question a couple of times on. Um, I got that very interesting questions from a guy who asked me, how do I include it in my business proposal?
Right.
uh, which is very interesting. How can I showcase the business impact of content design? So I gave him a couple of advice, and then I realized that actually the main issue is that his stakeholders probably have a low awareness of what UX is. So there is already this gap to bridge first. Um, what other questions do we have? A lot of questions about books. I think people are also interested about
what should we read? What can you recommend on this topic?
yes.
Yeah, and
Are
also
there any books that have been translated? Some of the more popular ones, like writing is designing or strategic writing for UX, have they been translated into
right,
Mandarin?
fantastic question. Writing is designing is actually translated.
Okay.
And it has not only it is translated, it also has a foreword by Betty C, who used to
Okay.
content design team for Airbnb China.
Yep.
So
Okay.
he was one of those very early practitioners
Yep.
who was building, I would say, content design team with Western mindset, but in China, operating in Chinese. So if you read Chinese, strongly recommend that translation and Betty's forward. And again, circling back to questions, I think there is another big group of questions that we've been getting, but we haven't brought up yet today. Uh, case by case, case by case. Hey, I have this page.
Oh yeah.
How big should the picture be? How big should the title be?
Yes.
How do I make sure people read it all the end? How do I make sure that people actually convert on this page?
Yes.
And actually, one of the suggestions I got during our meetups is, can we have an open mic? Can we have a content critique? Can we have a content critique all together and just go over this project and go over this content and kind of understand together what is the business goal here, what is the user goal, and how we can improve it. So I think that can be potential future direction for us to go, because the question of how I do it often cannot be answered without understanding the person's context, because it's a very broad question. How do you do content strategy? The only correct answer is it depends.
It depends. Yeah.
It depends on your industry, your company, your goal, your type of content, many things. So maybe the only way to answer how we do this is tell us what you want to do, and we will tell you how to do it.
I got that.
I think it that way. Sorry, Arnaud, go ahead.
Oh no, just to confirm what Anna was saying. I got that question a lot, like at that meetup in Shanghai. I was mentioning, like, so I've got this app, right? I want to do this and this. Could you take a look and tell me? So case by case for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's interesting though, because the problems you're describing are really a lot of the same problems that show up in every country that has a content design meetup. You get these challenges that pop up, and people want to know how to do content strategy and how to solve their content problems. And more lately, I guess one of the other big challenges has been AI, and like, how do they get AI to write content? But I think one of the interesting things that you've touched on is this lack of awareness of UX principles in general, and that obviously takes time for people to become aware of them and to learn essentially what those best practices are. I think one of the interesting things that you've described is this idea that you've kind of got these two different cultures, right? You've got the one culture of companies that are operating within China, and then you've got other companies that are operating globally. Now, for most other countries, they don't really have that split. So you may very well have people that trade within their own country, right? But you still have access and exposure to a lot of the rest of the world. Whereas in China, obviously, there are different parameters in place, different cultures in place that make it so that internally focused companies are very internally focused, and then those global companies, as you've said, are operating on a much wider scale. So it's interesting to me that there are companies now in China now focusing on content that, don't even really need to, not necessarily care about the rest of the world, but they're not really sort of maybe even thinking about it. I don't know if that's the right way to frame that, but it's kind of this sort of this two-speed UX industry.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think you pinpointed quite well. We do have this very different approach, and because of the wide number of reasons, you can grow successfully in Chinese market, and it's a huge market. It's
Yeah.
one of the biggest markets in the world, and it's not it's not a problem of hey, there won't be enough room for me to grow. There's enough room. There's plenty. So you can totally be very focused, and I think also there is a higher, I'd say, consistency of language when it comes to China, because when we look at Europe, for example, and I think Larry Swanson also pointed it out in one of his podcasts. There are a lot of content designers in Europe with localization background because you have to do localization in Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
One market, one language is too small, and even if you do one market, if you do France, right,
It's true.
you have to have Arabic, you have to have English in addition to French. Yeah, so it's always more diverse, it's always more I guess connected, it has to be different. You have to deal with different people, you have to be exposed to different culture. If you have a team of developers, it's more likely in Europe or in North America that it will be a diverse team of developers with different experience, coming from different countries, speaking different mother tongues, which is not the case in China. It's people who went to the same schools, studied the same things, and mostly speak the same language. Not that many foreigners in China, to be honest. So I think that's all those factors kind of contribute to Chinese market kind of being a little bit of its own thing.
I think content designers in, again, the West, and just people in general, tend to view China with an air of mystery. The one thing that I really find interesting is such a stark difference between those two cultures. And I actually tried learning Mandarin recently. Still trying. No, I'm not.
Yay.
Please don't clap. I'm not. I'm not good at all.
You see it.
And even just the way of speaking is so different because it's a tonal language, and so you have
Right.
the four tones, and I still can't get them right. And it's yeah, I think there's a mystery to the culture there. But you've just described a lot of similar challenges that companies and content designers face, no matter where they live. So I'm wondering, based on the article you've written, your own experiences, what is something that you wish content designers outside of China knew about what's going on in China regarding, I guess, sort of UX and design in general? What's something that you think that they should be able to take away that they may not know?
Most importantly, and I said it before because I think it is incredibly important. The way business is done here is different, and
Yep.
the way products are built here is different, and you cannot talk about design, UX design, and content design without that aspect. Things are much faster. If you're launching a feature in 6 months, somebody in China is going to launch it in 2 weeks.
Right.
It's a fact. It's a fact. I think one of my first encounters with overseas content designers offline. I think it was 2019 on during UX London, and I met some folks from Facebook, and I was like, so guys, how long does it take you to launch a page? And they're like, you have to do all the research, you have to do your sprint, you have to sync up with this team and that team. For 3 months. And I just came back from China, and the last thing I did before going to UX London is we launched the promo page in five languages in 7 hours from
Yeah.
zero.
Right. Yep.
Writing, design, localization, all done.
Yep.
And I'm like, wow, this is really different. So you need to understand that things are very fast. Things are faster than you used to, and it can be a little bit disorienting, you know.
But
When
there's
you do,
also something to learn there, right? There's something
oh,
to
yeah,
learn from the way that, obviously the big mantra in Silicon Valley is very much like move fast and break things, which I think
yeah,
is I think it's a Zuckerberg quote. But but in terms of the rest of the country and other types of organizations, it's very, as you say, it's very slow.
yeah.
Um, Maybe there's something to learn there, I think, even though there could be disadvantages to that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's all the advantages and disadvantages only emerge when your goal is clear and your means are in hand, right?
Yeah,
Same things
exactly.
can be advantage or disadvantage in different contexts. So yeah, there's definitely something you can learn. You can definitely something you can learn, and definitely it's a way also, I think, to really get to the core of the practice. What I mean by that is, okay, in order to create your perfect landing page, you need to have your competitor analysis. You need to have your user research. You need to uh, do some peer reviews, do some content critiques. You need to sync up with different teams. That would normally take a week. What if you have 3 days?
Hmm.
What would be the most important things to do? What if you only had 1 day? What would be the things you do? If you had 1 hour, what would you do? So it really helps you think about the core of our discipline and what are the most important things, and learn to prioritize vigorously to get to the core and only do the right things in a small time that you're given.
Hmm.
That's
Arnaud,
something.
would you echo that sentiment?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a great perspective that you bring here. It really allows to um, in the whole process. I mean, it's a good example of moving from the theory to the field. You know, it's what you learn, like the different steps. I don't know, in the design thinking framework, for example, a double diamond, and those all those theories that we know. Well, in reality, it really works like that. And
Hmm.
here it's even more true, because I mean you need to focus on what's really important, what you can do at the moment. Should I do user research? Yes, no. If yes, what can I do with that little time do I have? Can I ask people in my team or in other teams, or do I have time to schedule interview with users, and that fits that segment and so on. So it's really yes, you need to make a choice, because sometimes you cannot the theory doesn't fully apply
Mm.
to that situation. You need to make a choice on what you will do first. Yeah, fully agree on that. Yeah, speed
Awesome.
Yeah.
is of the essence. I think it could be an advantage. Also agree with what you mentioned, which it could be an advantage. um, it allows company here to be extremely nimble and fast
Right.
in the way they approach the business. They do not leave, how to say, they do not they cannot afford to be too far behind their competitors.
Right.
Hmm.
This is something like when a company in France, for example, speaking of my country, they would really ponder: should we develop such feature that the competitor has been doing? How long can we do that? What are the risks? We need to also don't forget about the QA and so on and so on and so on. Rounds of testing and research before it's actually launched. You don't have that question here.
Hmm.
In France, when you do all of that, you launch the feature. It's 6 months after all the buzz about this new feature has already died out. It's
Yeah.
here it allows to capitalize on this, to move fast and to not uh, lag too far behind your competitors. I think it is an advantage. Sometimes you have to move fast. Some other times you have to really ponder about a new feature, how to do it properly, and so on. So this is something that I think in many markets it is done. It is a challenge. Should we move fast? Should we not move fast? It is as equally a challenge as in France, Australia, or China, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think you've hit the nail on the head there. For anyone listening to this, no matter where they live, ruthless prioritization, I think, is the key there. Really getting down to the absolute minimum of what you need and moving quickly on it, which is a great point. Well, we've kind of reached the end of our time here, which is like absolutely flown by. I want to give you the opportunity to just comment on anything you wanted to say that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to say yet, or is there any sort of final thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
I think the final thoughts would be open-minded, please. If your company works with different markets, if your company is trying to reach new audience that are maybe not very familiar to you, uh, try your best to do your homework and try to understand them and try to understand what is different and be open-minded. Don't try to sell the good practices that work in your environment to completely different environment, and just be mindful. Maybe it's a little bit of a trivial thought, but be mindful of your biases when it
Hmm.
comes to reaching new audiences, especially audiences overseas, and be mindful of the fact that when you're working internationally, when you're a content designer, you also need to take some responsibility of the translation process, of localization process, and understand that things that work great in English might not work so great in other languages.
Hmm.
And be mindful of differences. Be mindful of the fact that the way that you were taught to do UX might not necessarily be universal, and you need to listen to your users first. You need to listen to users first and be very open-minded when you hear or see things that don't match your understanding. Be ready to learn new things and be ready to embrace new things, because again, working in international business, I see a lot of cases where people take things that worked very well in certain environment, being 100% confident that it's going to work in different environment as well.
Hmm.
It was great in France.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, it will work in India.
Yeah.
No.
No, not necessarily.
No.
And I see very different people giving me this statement on very different topics in international business. Like, no, they will figure it out. They will see that our thing is great. They just haven't figured it out yet. Um, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Start with your users always, and be mindful of the differences. Be mindful of the differences and be humble. That's what I want my final thought to be, I guess.
Good advice for anyone. Anna?
A final thought to add. I think it's I think we mentioned that at the start of the interview, the goal with the article was to really to put China on the map of content design, to show that there is a community there. Um, and honestly, since we wrote and published the article, it's just been growing. So then, perhaps one thought that would like people to keep is that it's growing. There is a genuine curiosity, interest into content design, but I think it's another challenge regarding that. So you mentioned probably a different awareness or understanding of UX that people have here in China. Another a challenge to keep in mind when it comes to content design in China is the small size of the community. I think even though we're trying to build up something, trying to connect people together.
Right.
it's still quite small. Not that many how to say, resources. Not as much, I would say, resources available as we could find elsewhere.
Hmm.
To our knowledge, there are no design school teaching UX writing.
Hmm.
Right.
Even the one teaching UX design. And so in terms of books, we just saw there is just one that has been translated. Perhaps there are some local books, we're still looking, but local books in Chinese that are great. But it's anyway, it's building. It's a process. It's work in progress when it comes to building a community of content design in China. And why I'm bringing this point, because I believe it's crucial to solidify the discipline here,
Right.
to exchange best practices, to support each other as well. This is something we saw in other markets. Either it is waves of layoff that we've seen more recently, or just the fight to have a seat at the table, or debates about should we call ourselves this or that, and so on. Those are healthy conversations that a community, that only a community can have. And so this is what we are trying to do here as well, and try to also bring other people from other markets attention, awareness of what's is being done here. So there is a lot to cover when it comes to content design in China. So yeah, that will be my final thought.
Well,
Okay,
I think you're
maybe
both doing a great job.
one asterisk before
Yeah.
we wrap up. When we talked about UX awareness during this whole podcast, I would like to point out that I think we would all agree that when we say, hey, China has lower UX awareness, it's not about Chinese app having bad user experience. Chinese apps have great user experience, and they fit their audience really well.
I think it's different.
It's just different, right?
Yes.
It's just when we talk about UX awareness, we're
Yes.
talking more about awareness of UX practices overseas, that you need to be more aware of as you cater to overseas markets.
Yes.
Yeah. So again,
The
it's all
the
about-
process by which these things are designed,
yeah,
more
yeah,
so than like the end product. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
It does exist. It's just different.
yeah,
Just different.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah,
Great. Well, Anna and Arnaud, thank you so much for having a chat about all of this. I think it's really fascinating, and we'll obviously link to the article in the show notes so people can go and read that. And yeah, hopefully people will contact you after this and want to attend your meetup, perhaps. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to how you help grow the community there in China, and looking forward to hearing great things. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.